Okay, we have some updated information on Thomas Crooks, the young man who tried to assassinate Donald Trump. I'm going to go through that quickly, as well as a possible theory of what his motivation might have been that I haven't seen anyone else talking about. So we now know that local authorities saw him at least 30 minutes before when an officer reported him using a rangefinder, literally in the area of where he would end up, getting range to how far it was to Donald Trump. But there was conversations about, was it a rangefinder or was it binoculars, and he was just trying to see the president. And then they lost sight of him, and then they saw him again, now with a large backpack. And then they lost track of him, and then they saw him again. Somehow that didn't set up enough red flags for them to keep an eye on him. And he leisurely climbed up on an AC unit to get up on the roof and did what he did. This is a giant lapse in security, a complete failure of protocols, and that should be investigated. We also now know, in addition to the explosives he had in his car, he had purchased the rounds that he used earlier in the day, and he also had some form of an IED on him that presumably he would detonate if someone tried to stop him. So he came there expecting not to go home. He came there to die, doing what he was trying to do. Now, ever since it came out that he was a registered Republican, Republicans have been bending over backwards to prove that he's not one. This guy left comments on multiple videos, including videos that weren't even about the shooting, as well as messaged me. And that's okay, because I was going to talk about this anyway. The narratives that have been going around are a couple. One is, yeah, he's a registered Republican, but he registered this year just to vote in the primaries and try and vote against Donald Trump. But he's really a Democrat, because the other narrative is he's donated a bunch of money to a bunch of Democratic candidates. He was a big supporter of them. And his being registered as a Republican was just to try and infiltrate the Republican Party and cause problems. So first, no, didn't register as a Republican this year. Registered in 2021, right after he turned 18. That's when he registered as a Republican. And the last time he voted was in the midterms in 2022. He didn't even vote in the primaries. So that's out. As far as supporting a bunch of Democrats or progressive causes, there's one donation they found. Just one. To Act Blue by a Thomas Crooks. That's his street address. It was made in January of 2021, and it was a whopping $15. But there's a few problems with this for me. First is, while that is his first and last name, and that is his street address, the city is listed as Pittsburgh, and he lives in Bethel Park, which is not completely super far away from Pittsburgh, but that's not his address. There is no 2506 Milford Drive, Pittsburgh. And I've seen other versions of this form that didn't show a street address, just showed Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. And several have pointed out that there is a Thomas Crooks who is 69 years old and lives in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, whereas Thomas M. Crooks, which is him, lives in Bethel Park. So there's at least a possibility that he is the one who donated. And since this form has been floating around on Twitter, I wouldn't put it past someone to just add his street address who wouldn't have thought that also they need to get rid of Pittsburgh. And there's also a font size difference. It's a little sus to me. Then also is when this happened. This happened in January of 2021. He was still 17 years old and in high school. And the press has talked to a lot of his former classmates, and they all say the same thing. He definitely was conservative. It makes me wonder why he would carry out an assassination attempt on a conservative candidate. The majority of the class was on the liberal side, but Tom, no matter what, always stood his ground on the conservative side. That's still the picture I have of him, just standing alone on one side while the rest of the class was on the other. I would almost put money on the fact that I probably had seen him wear a Trump shirt or something along the lines of that beforehand, which is why this is so shocking to me. Then a local station in Pittsburgh reported that they interviewed the Trump shooter's neighbors, and they told them for years he's had pro-Trump signs plastering his front yard. Then just earlier today, Channel 4 reports the father of the Trump shooter was a Trump supporter who was held on a database and profiled by the former president's election campaign. They go into great detail about how they had this whole dossier on him, about they identified him as a hunter and someone who's passionate about firearms. And he was someone they had tabs on to target as a supporter. But people say this doesn't make sense. He can't be a Republican. He can't be a fan of Trump. He hates Trump. How could he be a fan of Trump and hate him at the same time? Logically, it doesn't make sense, but therein lies the problem. What he did was illogical. You can't find reason in an unreasonable act. How could he love him and hate him enough to try and destroy him at the same time? Well, I offer this. What if he didn't hate him? What if he loved him? And that's why he did what he did. We've seen this before, especially with celebrities. People who get built up and are larger than life, and they become these icons that others look up to and become fixated on and become obsessed with. And they want to touch that greatness. They want to be near it. They want to be a part of it. What if this young man loved Donald Trump so much that he wanted to be attached to him forever, and he thought the best way to do that was to take his life, was to end him, and then forever he would be a part of it. And he's accomplished that. Forever he will be the guy who tried to shoot him. He did that. He went from obscurity. He went from no one. And now he will forever be a part of Trump. What if that was the motivation? Because I hate to say it, but when you have people who think that way, it's more than enough.